Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Microservices, Reducing Complexity and Delivering an Optimal Customer Experience in an Omnichannel World. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speakers are Julie Craig, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates, Jonathan Lindo, VP of Enterprise Mobility at CA Technologies, and Brian Whitmarsh, Director of APM Product Management at CA Technologies. Julie has over 20 years of experience in software engineering, IT infrastructure engineering, and enterprise management. At EMA, Julie's focus areas include DevOps, application performance, and availability management. Jonathan is focused on CA's mobility strategy, delivering innovation to enterprises deploying employee and customer-facing mobile apps. He has co-founded and led several venture-backed startup companies, including Replay Solutions. Brian has more than 15 years of experience focused on mobile technologies at leading companies. He has held mobility-focused roles in engineering, product management, consulting, technical sales, and centers of excellence. And before I hand things off to today's featured speakers, I did want today's audience to know that the speakers will be dedicating the last 10 or 15 minutes to answering your questions, so I do encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. You can log your questions at any time throughout the course of the presentation by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback, a PDF of the speaker slides, as well as a paper on today's topic. So I encourage you to check that out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Julie Craig. Julie?
Thank you so much, Raleigh, and hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's event. So the worlds of IT and business are converging today as never before. Digital services are creating new systems of engagement and even new business models as digitally empowered consumers increasingly view these services as essential elements in managing busy daily lives. Omnichannel service delivery, in which customers have multiple potential routes for engaging with the company, is a big part of this digital transformation story. For the next few minutes, I'll discuss both the business benefits of omnichannel services and the technical challenges that IT organizations are encountering as they seek to ensure a quality user experience as they navigate a company's online presence across multiple devices. I'll also discuss the reasons why automated management tools are becoming increasingly critical elements supporting omnichannel delivery. So what is omnichannel anyway? Well, it's a multi-channel approach to engaging customers, and it takes into account the fact that a single customer purchase may well span multiple devices, multiple timeframes, and it can even include a visit to a brick-and-mortar store. In some industries, this entire span of events is the new definition of a transaction. This delivery model can be a boon to sales, to a company's sales, and also to marketing teams who are always seeking ways to ensure customer loyalty and brand equity. It is also of growing importance to digital transformation initiatives that are happening in so many companies today. Digital transformation initiatives center around the use of technology to achieve business goals and objectives. Today, about 85% of the companies I survey are engaged in such initiatives, essentially finding new ways to use digital services to benefit the business. We recently asked survey respondents to list the functional capabilities that would be most important to their company's digital transformation initiatives in 2016. In other words, which organizational functions needed to be addressed before they could be successful with their planned transformation initiatives. As you can see, improved user experience and application performance management top the list. This highlights their importance as a way to improve end-user satisfaction with the digital services that are provided by a business. You can also see the growing importance of omnichannel delivery on this slide. Now, bear in mind that the numbers here are cross-industry. However, if we drill down into certain industry verticals, such as retail, the omnichannel numbers are quite a bit higher. Before I go on, I think maybe now is a good time to pause and just see if Jonathan and Brian from CA, do either of you have any kind of input on what I've discussed so far?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. This is Jonathan Lindo, folks, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and chat with you about microservices and omnichannel. Really exciting topic. And, you know, Julie, I think what you highlighted here in this survey really reflects what we're seeing out in the marketplace as we work with several thousand customers for CA Technologies. Recently, I was on a panel discussion at the Open Mobile Media Conference in San Francisco, and I had an opportunity to be on a panel on stage with a number of folks, including the Chief Digital Officer for American Eagle. And, you know, what you've shown here was really what he was highlighting as some of the challenges that they're working on and having some good success around really bringing together these different challenges and the different tools that they're using so that when somebody's interacting with American Eagle, whether it's because they walk into one of the retail stores, they're firing up the mobile application, or they're on the website, they can really bring that together to have a customer-centric view of what's going on. And a lot of what you've highlighted here is specifically what we heard in that panel discussion, so it's good data.
It's always interesting for me to hear some of these vignettes that you folks talk about who are in the field every day as well, so thanks, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now I'd like to shift gears for a few minutes and discuss some of the technology-related aspects of omnichannel delivery that are making it such a challenge for so many IT organizations. Bear in mind that user experience and APM were two key focus areas. That being said, one primary functional element of omnichannel is continuity of experience. So regardless of when, where, or how a customer may choose to engage, they want to have a feeling that on the other end of the wire, someone there or something there understands that they've actually engaged previously, potentially from another device or maybe from an in-store kiosk. Now, this whole story, of course, implies extensive support on the IT side for mobile devices. Another thing to bear in mind is that the use of containers and microservices to deliver on omnichannel requests is very common. Microservices are touted as a new development and deployment model ideally suited for flexibly delivering software functionality. Each microservice encapsulates specific software features and processes into a small, flexible component. These components are typically deployed in containers with each small service performing a specific set of tasks and running as its own process. And of course, the components are then orchestrated and connected via APIs, application program interfaces, passing data back and forth. These are loosely coupled execution chains that provide a basis for unprecedented business flexibility. That's because the function of an application can be easily updated, changed, or extended by simply adding an additional microservice without affecting other components in the execution workstream. So good ideas at the business level can actually be implemented much more quickly. Now, while the microservices design is actually very elegant, under the covers, the technology ecosystem supporting the model is extremely complex. It relies on a broad multi-component fabric that's basically knitted together with a patchwork quilt of various types of networks and APIs. This means there are a wide variety of potential failure points that can disrupt delivery of a quality user experience. Things like variations in Wi-Fi, in mobile networks, in LAN and WAN networks, are all notorious for causing performance degradation. Omnichannel delivery also adds a wide variety of consumer devices, API software, connections to back-end and third-party systems, and many other components. And in an era where only about 50% of companies are telling us at EMA that they actually have APM platforms capable of managing their existing applications, it's safe to say that even fewer are equipped to monitor and manage the complexity that we see with omnichannel services. And although a service interruption may not even be the fault of the company providing the app, from the user perspective, this entire series of events represents both the company and the quality of its digital portfolio. So regardless really of whether it's your fault or not, the customer perceives it as being your fault. So this complex ecosystem spawns a wide variety of performance-related challenges. Of course, I covered a few on the previous slide, but I also wanted to draw out the API element of microservice delivery. From the consumer side, so in other words, if you're a company that's using APIs provided by others, you're basically at the mercy of the other organization for performance and availability. So if the third-party service is slow, it's very difficult to compensate for that slowness at your end, at the transaction level. In other words, the entire transaction as experienced by the user will likely be slow as well. API providers, so those of you who actually have created your own APIs as input into your own systems, aren't really immune from issues either. You're opening up internal systems for external access, which is certainly a security concern. In addition, almost 85% of the companies acting as API providers also report that transaction volumes incoming to their API gateways are increasing over time, and most often, if I look at the various percentages of how fast these are increasing, the most common percentage is by 10 to 20% per month, depending on how popular the usage is of that API. So the omnichannel transaction that's working fine today may well start to overtax underlying resources tomorrow as more users connect to the API. So from the performance management standpoint, there are a significant number of potential risks. And a big part of managing omnichannel delivery is being able to understand API performance in the context of the user experience. So I think maybe I'll pause here just briefly again to see if Brian or Jonathan has anything else to add.
I'll jump in really quickly. This is Jonathan again. I think what you've hit on here, Julie, is absolutely spot on in terms of what we're hearing customers talk about. When you look at the absolutely low tolerance that customers have in today's world with mobile, anything that takes over 2 to 3 seconds to complete in terms of a transaction, whether they're waiting for the next screen in the mobile application, they click that buy button, or they're searching for a product, if that takes any more than a couple of seconds, they're gone. And so it's absolutely critical that we are always providing the absolute best level of performance and being able to mitigate potential challenges, as you mentioned, in the network with slow connectivity that they might have. And you can do that through some tricks around having ability to provide offline data in the cases where API access is slow or unavailable. And so there's a lot of things that you can do that we're seeing some of our customers employ to make sure that that quality of service and that responsiveness is always exceptionally high.
Very helpful input, Jonathan. Thanks. So moving on here. This brings us to the topic of automation, specifically enterprise management tools that are geared towards performance and availability of omnichannel services. So there are a couple of product families that are particularly relevant here. We're seeing significant interest in end-user experience tools that basically help quantify performance of a transaction from the point of view of the consumer. There are a wide variety of products in this category. Some monitor from the perspective of the browser, others from the network, from the execution platform, or the endpoint. All can help IT organizations see transaction performance as the user sees it. Application performance management, or APM tools, are also becoming increasingly important. As you can see here, they're cited by more than 80% of our survey respondents as being important or very important to digital transformation. So again, we come back to the digital transformation story. This means that although execution ecosystems may be more complex than ever before, it's essential that APM solutions support this complexity with newer technologies, such as those covering mobile devices and networks, Docker, and even non-standard endpoints, such as kiosks at some point. Prior to an APM purchase, it's important for the customer to look at a vendor to be sure that their track record has supported the addition of new technologies to their existing APM platforms on an ongoing basis. And of course, this ensures the value proposition of your product investment over time. Companies deploying Omnichannel and Microservices should particularly focus on mobile technologies, container-driven technologies, API coverage, as well as on functionality supporting end-user experience monitoring. This slide is a summary of considerations to keep in mind when selecting APM tool sets supporting Omnichannel. And I've talked about most of them. However, I'd like to just say a few words here about dynamic topologies. Scaling is one key benefit of microservices. Companies that have been working with container-based microservices for some time tell us that scaling becomes a simple matter of deploying an additional container to an on-premise or cloud-based server. Now, while this can be a boon as a company grows or as a service becomes more popular, it can be difficult to keep track of all the containers supporting a given transaction, which of course makes troubleshooting an issue. Tools supporting dynamic topology mapping can help keep track of the resources underlying an application as they come online. And of course, this can be of enormous assistance for troubleshooting and root cause analysis of performance issues. So just a few words in conclusion, and then we'll move on to our polling question. Modern application ecosystems they're becoming increasingly complex, yet fewer than half of the companies I talk to have the tools they need to manage them. Over time, this can become a significant roadblock to digital transformation. Without adequate tools, Dev and Ops teams too often spend too much time on production support and not enough time on creating and deploying new business services. And since Dev and Ops teams are the key to transformation, IT organizations become trapped in an ongoing cycle of deferring projects and then failure to deliver on the projects they've taken on. So particularly for companies that are focusing on application performance and user experience management as part of digital transformation, the payoff of any investments made in APM tooling can rapidly offset the costs. So this concludes my section of the presentation, and at this point in the event, I'm going to turn the webinar back over to Raleigh to run our polling question. Raleigh?
Great. Thank you, Julie. This is the one polling question we'll have during the webinar. The question is, where are you in the adoption of a tool to monitor your user's experience across more than one device? Please select one of the following. Already have a solution in place, evaluating different tools, using an in-house developed tool, or not currently being monitored. I'll leave this poll question up for about 20 seconds or so to provide everyone an opportunity to take that while you're taking the survey. I did also want to remind the audience that the event is being recorded, and you're going to receive a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow. It also is going to include a new white paper on this topic that Julie just recently made available. So I do encourage you to go ahead and check that out. I am going to close the poll and pass it over to you, Jonathan, to talk about the results.
Awesome. Thank you, Relly. And thank you, Julie, for, I think, a really informative opening to this discussion. So as soon as those poll numbers come through, I think we can jump in and chat a little bit about that. But, you know, as we get into this, when you look at who are these that we're really working with these days, and wow, here comes the poll results. All right, so let's take a second to talk about this. So 67% are not currently monitoring across Omnichannel. So I think that really is in line with what we're seeing as well. So there was a study done recently by CMO.com, which deals with chief marketing officers and marketing departments, and they reported that 85% of those polled were doing very little. One of the biggest challenges that they reported was bringing together the data across Omnichannel to really create a unified view. Their challenges that they described were the siloed nature of all of that data that's coming in from mobile, from web, from their retail locations or their banking branches and so on. And so that really is in line. It's a huge problem. I think everybody recognizes that being able to execute on Omnichannel is both a huge opportunity as well as a huge risk if they don't do it in terms of remaining competitive. But the ability to do that is still not very well understood. So let's talk a little bit about what that means in the real world, and I'll talk about what we're seeing some of our customers out in the marketplace what are they doing to address that challenge. So these are the folks that we're really working with. These are the disruptors, the customers who have these exceptionally high expectations around the level of service that we can provide. And I'm going to give one quick example in the case of banking. So banking is one of the most, financial services and banking are some of the most advanced in terms of the digital experience that they're providing to customers. And they're doing a great job because in many cases, it's the only way they have to differentiate their services and their offerings from their competitors. We're not really going into branches of our bank that often anymore, but we're probably interacting through the web and mobile on a pretty frequent basis. So that's got to be just a high-class, very high-quality experience. So let's give an example of this Omnichannel and how microservices can really address it. So I'm going to walk through a quick example here of a customer who opens up a new account with a banking institution through their web browser and then starts to immediately research auto loans from their mobile device. So now we're starting to understand a little bit about the intent of this user. We see that they then start to transfer funds through their Apple Watch. A lot of these banking institutions now, including mine, has a pretty decent app on the Apple Watch that you can do a number of things, including transfer funds, check your balance, pay bills. And so now we've got this user who's checking and transferring funds, checking loan rates and transferring funds through their different devices. Now they're checking auto loans every day for 7 days. So we have a phenomenal opportunity here to engage with this user, really understanding their intent. If we can pull that data together across Omnichannel, understanding that they are likely about to buy a car and what they might need to push them over the edge to actually open up a loan with our institution is maybe an immediate offer with a call to action, in this case to take some discount off the daily loan rate. And that might be just what they need to bring them on board as a loan customer, which is one of the most highly profitable, highest margin products that a financial service like a bank can offer to their customers. So here's a great example of bringing those omnichannel, that data together across omnichannel from the different devices and really making it actionable so that we can do very targeted, personalized offers out to our customers. So how do we activate that omnichannel? How do we really go about making it a reality? Well, we have to really understand that all the products and services that we're offering are now across all these different channels, from mobile to web, wearables like the Apple Watch, increasingly the TV. This past holiday season, we saw about 50 million Apple TVs get sold across the world, around the world, and now we have apps that we can run on our TV as well with Android TV. And physical, we need to really understand when a customer walks into our store or our banking location, can I really understand what their intent is based on pulling together the data across these different channels? And so how do we go about doing that? Number one, we really need to be able to, get the data. We've got to be able to collect the data from these different omnichannels, make sure that we're capturing it is the first and most important thing that we can do. APM is a great solution to help with that, but if we start doing specific monitoring solutions for our data center and a different one for our mobile devices and another one for our in-store physical locations, it becomes very difficult to normalize that data. So being able to, A, get the data, but then B, normalize it so you've got these common key performance indicators where you can correlate and start to tie together the different data streams that we have coming in through mobile, through web, to understand customer intent is what allows us to really move on to the next stage, which is analyze it. And when we can then start to do things such as ad hoc multivariate queries across that data that we've collected with the common KPIs that we've normalized, then we start to have real business intelligence about our customer. And that's really where we want to get to. That's kind of the nirvana state. And we'll talk about what we can do once we've achieved that, but it's really a journey. This is not something that can happen overnight. I mentioned that I was speaking in depth with the chief digital officer at American Eagle. It took them about 2 years to get to the point where they can really understand when a user walks into their store, a customer walks into their store, they can say, this is a customer using iBeacons. This is a customer that has been searching for jeans through the mobile app. They did an online chat through our web app, and now we can really provide them that personalized level of experience when they walk into our store. So how do we tie all this together? If you can start to normalize and bring together all the data that you're collecting and have it really flow into a common data repository or data lake, then you can start to really achieve the most important thing, which is understanding your customer and understanding where you can provide the most value to each and every one of those individual customers. So being able to do that means that you can not only start to understand and illuminate the customer journey, it allows you to start making data-driven decisions around what that customer is trying to do, and then you can start to really optimize. Great example of optimization. If I open up my mobile device, if I bring up my banking application on my iPad and I click Apply for a Loan, and it starts to walk me through a loan application process in my iPad application for my bank, and I start to see that it's asking me for a lot more detailed information. While it'd be really nice if I just had a keyboard. So then I go over to my web browser. Well, I don't want to start that loan application again. If I understand and that data can flow from one application to the other, in this case from the mobile app to the web app, then I can start to really optimize and increase the completion rate and the conversion rate for my customer who's looking to open a loan, which again is a very high margin, high value transaction for me. So optimizing that kind of workflow. Conversely, if that person, that customer walks into my branch, if I can know that just, yesterday they were looking at loan applications in the mobile application, then I can provide that personalized level of service and interaction and have a much higher percentage of conversion and extracting value from that customer and providing really good service to that customer because I know what they want the moment they step foot into my banking location. And so as a customer, I get a much better level of experience, and I'm not treated the same as somebody who's just coming in to deposit a check, and I'm much more likely to do more business with that financial institution, as an example. So that's what we had to talk about today for my section, and I think with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to my colleague, Brian, who is going to speak about some of the techniques and tools and solutions that are available in the marketplace to help you achieve some of this with microservices, which are really key and fundamental. Brian?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Again, my name is Brian Whitmarsh, and privileged to talk to you today. I just have 3 slides for you. So my goal here is to kind of review initially some of these challenges that have been presented by Julie and Jonathan. And then I want to provide you how CA has your back. So, let's take these challenges and let's morph them into what type of technologies can assist in providing solutions for these challenges. Now, I go from left to right here, and so if you look, it's kind of structured where we talked about the challenges around omnichannel. Omnichannel experience interacts with APIs. APIs are servicing content and data that are provided by microservices and containers. And then we obviously have our traditional back-end system. So you kind of go from left to right there from the challenge perspective. The first thing I wanted to focus on is omnichannel. Obviously, when we saw the first slide that Julie presented, it was the number one area of focus is how do we improve the user experience around omnichannel? And, the bar is set very high today, especially with the advent of these public app stores that have these great applications. A lot of them are games, but you have this great experience and you have this 5-star experience for participating in these applications. Examples that I give, how do you provide that 5-star presentation or experience is around really understanding your user and almost, I say read the mind of the user. I have a fitness app that I've been using for many years, and, various iterations of that fitness app has come out. And each time a new version comes out, it seems like something that I've been trying to do that may have been a little bit difficult, maybe 2 or 3 screens into the application, has been made easier. So without me asking for a feature enhancement, they have been reading the mind of the user and provide that enhanced user experience. And as I move to now having a watch and being able to do activities on the watch, I see those activities on the watch improve version over version. So that's really where I'm going to go out and promote, say, yeah, this is a 5-star app. This is somebody that understands me, and that experience is bar none. Another example here is, from a challenging perspective, that's not easy because really what you want to do is you want to provide this seamless interaction between, all these different devices, whether it's mobile, web, wearables, or, if I'm physically going into bricks and mortar store, how does that become a seamless experience? Now, we've seen examples, and I know there's technology out there that does that because, I go to Amazon.com and everything I purchased, I look at the star ratings and the reviews, but, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I went to look for an air compressor for my Jeep. Now it seems like wherever I go, whether it's on my mobile device, in the Amazon app, or my Facebook app, they know I want to buy that air compressor. And so there's that experience where following me along on various different devices, they're seeding in, hey, here's that air compressor, here's the current cost. So that ability to have that seamless interaction is paramount to making businesses successful. To complicate things, omnichannel means, many different devices, many different networks. So there's a variety of different devices and challenges that need to be addressed in order to support omnichannel. Now, moving over to APIs, the challenges around APIs, the API is really that glue that connects the omnichannel experience to the microservices and the containers that are providing the data. And especially around when we talk about microservices and containers, the volume of APIs increases. It's no longer this monolithic application that provides, with 1 or 2 calls, all the information that an app needs. No, it's a bunch of little APIs that provide little bits and pieces that are brought in together for that overall experience in the application itself. So you have the challenge of a bunch of different APIs, and then you have the challenge of, well, is there too much communication going back and forth? Is there some bottlenecks around that user experience? We talked a little bit about third-party APIs and not having control of those third-party APIs, but you have to be able to monitor them and make sure that they're holding up to their SLAs. Otherwise, that overall experience is going to be poor. It's not going to be 5-star. And then you have to make sure that those APIs are secure. Moving one layer deeper again, those APIs are being provided by either traditional monolithic backend applications, or as we talk about in this survey, more of the container or microservice model. With that model, it's very agile, it's very iterative, so you have a lot of change, constant change. And these microservices are multiplying like bunny rabbits, right? They're going all over the place. And needing that ability to control the sprawl of all these microservices is paramount. And then just get visibility into it. We work with some customers, and they lay out their topology, and 5 or 6 years ago, it was a fairly simple topology. You kind of get it on one piece of paper, and you could say, here's the application, here's the interact. You throw microservices into that, and it all of a sudden becomes this tangled web of different transactions, different API accesses going all over the place. So being able to get some visibility into that. And then you can't forget the backend, right? Backend systems, whether they're physical devices that are hosting these containers or microservices, you got to make sure that those services aren't being underutilized or overutilized. Backends, the complete transaction needs to be traced, so you need a lot of detail here for traditional backend systems. So we definitely can't forget about the complexity and challenges around the backend. All right, next slide.
Sure.
So now what I want to do is kind of shift to, what are some reviews of solutions for these challenges? And the first one, again, from an omnichannel perspective, is taking from how was the user experience to obviously we want to try to improve that user experience. Typical tools that are used to improve the user experience are analytics tools that can analyze and monitor things such as crash analytics, performance analytics, usage analytics, being able to trace a transaction from start to finish, so from the entry device or entry point, whether it's web, mobile, whatever, to the back-end system. So those are kind of a list of how we typically solve those solutions. From an API perspective, we obviously get into solutions that are API gateways, whether they're mobile access gateway or they're an entry point that you can basically have a central point that all this interface can happen, and so it can be fully monitored, and a layer of security can be provided, support for single sign-on to improve the user experience, management, making sure it can scale. All that is addressed by products in that category around API management. Then we get into containers and microservices. And as Julie mentioned, the important thing is the ability to be dynamic and make sure that you can dynamically monitor, you can dynamically provide views of the architecture to really reduce the complexity. Because like I said, it turns into this spider web where we need to break down and figure out what's taking place, provide a view to folks that are monitoring or managing the solution that makes sense to them and isn't just a bunch of complexity. And that, you get into monitoring of these microservice technologies, such as Docker, and Cloud Foundry, and Node.js, those technologies that are used heavily in that arena. And then from a back-end perspective, we want to be able to resolve issues as fast as possible on the back-end side. So really that deep visibility into what's taking place on the back-end systems, whether it's performance, transaction-related, down to the millisecond of what's taking place. So those are the traditional, solutions for the challenges that we spoke to. Now I want to get, pretty specific for you and talk about CA's technology solutions. And so go ahead, next slide. So in the same categories, we talk about how to improve the user experience. And you see, when I talk about the solutions, that there is a foundation or a base that is our application performance management solution across the board. That product gives you the ability to really monitor from start all the way to the back-end process and back to the application or to the endpoint. So that's really our foundation. When Jonathan talked about, tools that need to get the data, that need to normalize the data, that's the layer that is kind of the central point for collecting and normalizing the data. In each category, you have kind of a specialized product to help tweak or provide an extra layer of detail. And from an omnichannel perspective, we have our CA Mobile Application Analytics product. This product is really built to greatly improve the user experience. And it allows for a single SDK that provides, the crash analytics, the performance analytics, the usage analytics. Gives full monitoring and the ability for customers to go back and kind of see a VCR-like recording of sessions. That's paramount to be able to see the user experience or behavior of your users. The ability to see where they're clicking on the screen is very important. Understanding your funnel, how many people come into the app, where they may drop off, where they may be successful, what's that percentage, very important. And then the ability to see the device handoff. Omnichannel, we're thinking of, an experience that consumes multiple different devices. And as developing these apps and trying to read the mind of our customers, we want to be able to say, oh, okay, they're doing these activities on their watch. And then when they move to this type of activity, it's typically on the phone. And then this activity may move from the phone to the tablet. Giving a clear view is what mobile application analytics can provide of step-by-step, where is that process, where is that user experience or behavior. From an API perspective.
Brian, sorry, really quick, you just reinforced that point. There was a really good study that came out recently that talked about how folks are able to track and monitor the success of Omnichannel, and over 80% of respondents surveyed said that they felt the inability to measure cross-channel performance was really standing in their way of that achieving that success with Omnichannel. So it really is being highlighted more and more as we see Omnichannel become much more important, much more relevant in the marketplace.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, so and to add to that, from an API perspective, there needs to be that ability to monitor, to secure, to manage the APIs. And from CA perspective, our CA API management tool set provides that level of detail and level of overall management for the APIs and performance related. Again, like I said, the underlying there is the application performance management piece that across the board provides a clear view from start to finish of what's taking place. From a container and microservices perspective, we talk about change being constant, being something that is happening all the time. We're agile. We're building microservices. We're tearing them down. That ability to keep up with change and be able to simulate environments with our service virtualization software to say, okay, if I make this change, what is that going to do? If I increase load, are those microservices going to fall down? Do I need to scale or add additional microservices? That's very vital. And from an application performance management perspective, the ability to roll back and go, okay, let's look at over time, something happened. Somebody brought up another microservice or something changed in my topology. I want to go back to right before that change and then right after that change. And so I can see and pinpoint the root cause of what's taking place and get a good visibility into the change via the timeline. But then also I want to take that spider web and I want to make it very simple. So our perspective technology that says, okay, for you that are monitoring this service, this is the dynamic view that you need that's going to be important to you, that's going to actually add value and allow you to get to the root cause of what's taking place and solve the challenge very, very quickly. And then from a back-end perspective, like I said, these microservices, they're running on architecture or hardware, so it's very important to be able to manage that infrastructure. You look at our unified infrastructure management tools to be able to monitor the performance, the activities of those back-end systems, and again, application performance management to be able to track the application detail and the transaction detail, down to the millisecond, so we can identify quickly what's taking place, where there may be complications or challenges. So I just wanted to give you an overview of what we talked about, and then these are challenges. These are how challenges are typically addressed. Here's from a CA perspective. Here's we have your back. Here's the solutions and the technology behind the scenes that can allow you to be successful in this, I won't say crazy, but this new, very dynamic, very quick microservices omnichannel landscape. So
yeah, I think, Brian, this is really good stuff. And I think if you look at across the portfolio of the solutions available from CA Technologies, we've really got a very powerful set of solutions that are helping customers to enable omnichannel and really tie together the different data streams from all these different channels, whether it's through APIs or the backend services, the mobile devices, as you mentioned, as well as in pre-production and dev and test, where you can really simulate what's going to happen in this crazy omnichannel world. So it's a really great time. I think if you look at all the technologies available from CA, great partner to consider when you're embarking on that journey we talked about of enabling and achieving omnichannel success. So good stuff.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. So now we want to reserve some time for some Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Raleigh to kind of lead that Q&A session for us.
Great. Thank you, Brian. If you have any questions, you can log them using the Q&A functionality. You should see that in the right-hand column of your screen. If you're in full slide view, simply look for the floating toolbar. You'll see a question mark icon. Click on that, and you can log your questions that way. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions, starting with you, Julie, and of course, Jonathan and Brian. All of you should feel free to add anything else to the responses. Julie, the first question is, what's the difference between end-user experience management and APM? Are they the same thing?
Well, that's a great question. And, as we navigate through the various enterprise management products that are available, there are so many different product classifications that sometimes it's hard, to kind of distinguish which is which, and particularly when it's time to choose a solution. So, in my mind, they're very closely related, and, they're divergent opinions, but, I guess I kind of view end-user experience management as sort of maybe a subset of APM. But end-user experience management products are typically very specifically focused on, as the name implies, what the user is seeing. So how long is a transaction taking? Jonathan mentioned the 2 to 3 second response time. How long is the end user waiting until they see a result from the transaction that they want to execute? APM products, in my mind, are more, they have more depth and more breadth. So basically, I would expect an APM product to be able to show me some infrastructure-related information, some application end-to-end information to help me figure out when the user reports a problem, where the problem actually is. And in many cases, the EUE products alone don't have that diagnostic ability to actually drill down into the underlying infrastructure to help you diagnose problems. Do you agree with that, Jonathan?
Yeah, Julie, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. When we look at end-user experience, it's a critical piece of achieving success. You really want to understand what is that end user seeing on their device or in the web browser. How long is it taking them to move through a particular workflow, maybe to look up a product or complete a purchase? But it's equally important to understand when that is taking too long or they're having a subpar end user experience. I need to be able to correlate that to what's going on the network, in my data center, in the code running on the app, running in the application on the device or in the browser. And I need to be able to understand what the root cause of any challenges my users are having. And sometimes those challenges are related to just user interface. It's maybe not a well-designed application, but in many cases it's not. It's because the APIs are taking too long to respond because there's not enough horsepower in the data center or in the cloud. And so it's really critical to be able to tie those things together, do that level of correlation, because understanding memory and CPU load and latency is really important, but it's not that relevant unless you can tie it back to end user experience. So you really need both. And where we're really taking APM is to help our customers get that customer-centric view, understand end user experience, but most importantly, understand what's causing that good or bad end user experience and how to improve it.
Great, thank you both. Jonathan, staying with you, another question that came in is, we are just getting started with a microservices-based development and deployment model. What have you seen as the biggest benefits?
Yeah, some of the biggest benefits are that now you can really start to achieve some of the promises of agile methodologies. And so agile is the promise of agile is that we can really move quickly. We can fail fast. We can iterate quickly. We can roll software updates on a daily basis, even an hourly basis in some cases. A good friend of mine actually just left Nike, went over to Comcast Xfinity, but he was the CTO of Nike with their consumer products division, did a lot of great work, and they really transformed Nike to where they were deploying software tens, even sometimes 100 times a day. They were deploying updates. And the reason they could do that is because they had these very modular microservices where they could update a specific component within their overall complex architecture, and they could deploy that. And what they would do is they would deploy that into what's called a canary environment. They would test it out, make sure it was working well, and if it passed all those tests, and what they would do is traffic shape a percentage of their customer base over that canary environment, test that microservice, and then either roll it back if it wasn't performing well or wasn't behaving properly, or roll it into production. So microservices allows us to really tackle these problems one bite at a time and focus on improving one area one bite at a time. And so it really enables some of the promises of agile methodology, and we're seeing some very large companies really benefit and take a lead over their competitors as a result.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. Now jumping over to you, Brian, can you address how can APM tools help us trace transaction execution?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's really fundamental to, the APM solution is the ability to, overall the user experience is degraded. And, there could be 50, 60 different things that could be causing that. And so the ability to basically say, let's take and know that when the user clicked on the button, whatever it was, it took 6.7 seconds. Now, Jonathan already identified that, anything over 3 in an omnichannel mobile agile world, that's going to get bad reviews. It's not acceptable. So we have an alert set up to say anything that takes more than 3 seconds, notify me. So from the mobile, say from the mobile device that user was interacting, they clicked on the button. It took, 6.7 seconds. The ability to say, okay, that was a poor user experience, but now let me drill in deeper. So the ability to then have inside of APM to say, okay, let's break that call down into milliseconds. Let's say when it left the mobile device, it hit the front-end API, and APM can say, okay, when it hit the APM, this was the offset, this was the amount of time that was spent, and then when it gets to the back-end application or service, these are the methods inside of those instrumented or tooled applications to understand each method, where the amount of time took place in each individual method. So it basically allows you to start high level and then just drill in and even, by the millisecond say, okay, this single method inside of this application or this API call took 89% of the overall time. I need to focus my attention there, so get to root cause very quickly and figure out how to improve that so that I can get in that, SLA of under a 3-second exchange rate. And that's all, provided with application performance management and that ability to leverage the interscope tools and tool the application so that you understand exactly what's taking place.
Thanks, Brian. I just received an interesting question. I'll throw it out to whomever wants to answer it, or perhaps you all want to provide your feedback. This attendee wants to know who is orchestrating and driving microservices, DevOps or SIS Admin? What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. I like that question because it really highlights some of the challenges as well as the benefits of microservices, because when you've got all these microservices, there can be hundreds, if not thousands in some cases. It's really not feasible for the IT ops or the sysadmin who's managing that data center to have the understanding and the scope of each and every one of those microservices. So DevOps becomes absolutely critical in a world of microservices. The DevOps team is obviously the one who is defining, architecting, and orchestrating these microservices, and they need the ability, in addition, to be able to monitor and manage them in production. So you really need an empowered DevOps team to get all the benefits out of microservices in terms of doing what I mentioned earlier, of being able to roll into a canary environment and even into production, as well as roll back should things go horribly awry. We need that ability. We need that DevOps team to be empowered to really have the full scope of understanding what are the microservices that are deployed, what services are they providing, what's the downstream effect if one of those microservices is not behaving well, and how do I manage that effectively? And so a DevOps team is critical, in my opinion, to achieve success with microservices.
That's a great point, Jonathan. I know we're nearing the end of the hour, but if I could just jump in for 1 minute. I've done a lot of research on DevOps, and, most companies actually have these cross-functional teams in place. They might not always be called DevOps. In some companies, they're called application management teams, centers of excellence. They could be called infrastructure services. So these are people who have the cross-functional skills that are necessary to roll out and support the kind of services we're talking about today.
Great.
Yes, no, we're seeing the same thing. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you all for taking those questions, and I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Please do check out that email. As I mentioned, there's a new white paper on this topic that I think you will find beneficial. You will be receiving that email tomorrow. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.